So could that pull down China? And what would happen if China, if they thought we need to take over Taiwan before we lose our strength, before we deteriorate? Would they do that? Well, the reason I asked that, there is an article that has been written and just recently published in a magazine, in the Foreign Policy magazine, that a lot of people around the world read. But the article is called "China is a Declining Power," and that's the problem. And if you won't go to the internet, it's a wonderful article. Just go to "China is a Declining Power," and that's the problem. And you can find that. It's written by Hal Brands and Michael Beckley. And it just came out late September this year, 2021. So we're going to talk about that and look at the problems China is having, and could it collapse like a house of cards? Could China, the communist government, be in big trouble? Well, I'll tell you some things you probably have not heard. So we'll get to that. And let me first remind you that you're listening to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. You're listening to us right here on webtalkradio.net. That's webtalkradio.net. We're glad to have each and every one of you. And we got people listening around the world. So we're glad. If you're picking this up to learn more about China, thank you for listening to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. Tell your friends and neighbors. Look back at our archives and look at the different shows we've had. And we appreciate you listening to us, hey, around the nation, all 50 states. It's very important to hear this of what China, what's going on with China. And I will say, there's just some things in this article that you just have to hear. So take a listen to this, and then we're going to jump into what is bringing China to the brink of woe.
Yes, I think that this is a systemic problem in the Chinese economy. It's not just about one firm. This is about China's real estate sector, which begins with local governments selling land to government-affiliated or favored land developers who get financing from government-affiliated or favored financiers, and then sell to local people. And so this is a business model that's flawed. It's not just one company that's out of control, and the entire business model is going to be a problem in a country where real estate is a disproportionate amount of GDP in the economy.
So what are your expectations then when it comes to this in terms of China's ability to contain the problem, or is it going to spread to other real estate developers and to overall the market? As you point out, real estate is such an important asset class in China, not to mention an important part of the economy.
Well, if I was someone in China thinking about buying an apartment, I think I would probably hold off watching what's happening with Evergrande. But I think that the central government is going to address this in a Chinese way. They're not going to allow some kind of catastrophic collapse. What China has done in the past, for example, when state-owned enterprises have failed, is they merged them. When the stock market went south, they got the national team of Chinese affiliated financiers to come in and prop up the stock market. HNA has failed, and they've done asset sales. So they are going to prolong the situation, try to create a glide path. The government thinks it has the responsibility in a state-led economy to guide all economic activity. And so I think they're going to have a prominent role, but it will not be a Lehman moment kind of scenario.
Well, that was Jeff Moon. He was talking on CNBC a couple of weeks ago, and he said it won't be a Lehman type, talking about the 2008 the crisis that hit America when Lehman Brothers failed, and Evergrande, however you want to pronounce it, it's huge in China, and it's got a lot of real estate, but they have so much debt, and there's a lot of people associated, a lot of companies that are associated. But let's look at China, and you got to remember, China is a communist country. So the facts and figures that we are hearing, how much truth is in that? So it won't be another Lehman Brothers moment. I don't know if that's true. I hope, for goodness sake, we're hearing truth out of the communists. But how many times have communists told the truth? especially when it comes to companies in China. And you talk about, well, is it too big to fail? Will China get behind it? But what is China? What is China's financial condition? Well, there's some people estimate the GDP, and we've watched America's GDP, and you know how bad it is when we've gone up to $28 trillion, and if Joe Biden and Democrats get their way, they tack on another, $4 trillion at $32 trillion, and then we're like at 135% of America's GNP, the gross national product, and that's horrible. And there's been studies have shown that countries that go over 100%, they don't ever return, and they don't ever become, the country fails basically, and they go into deep decline. I hope that's not going to be the case for America, but my goodness, we got to have some leaders to wake up and smell the coffee. You hear that, Joe Biden? Hear that, Chuck Schumer? Hear that, Nancy Pelosi? Please wake up and smell the coffee. But what is China's deal? What's their GNP? And what's their debt percentage? Well, of America owing $28 trillion now, soon to be $32 trillion if the Democrats get their way. But China is like over 200, 250. Some people estimate maybe 300% of they're borrowing that much more than they have in the gross national product. I mean, that's how much they owe. They are in dire straits. Is China on the brink of financial ruin? Well, they have borrowed money. They've allowed their banks to do things that other countries' banks can't do. And they have built farms in Africa. They've bought land in Africa. They've borrowed money to help build out China's economic landscape across the world in many places. That's how they've influenced the Panama Canal. That's how they've influenced how they get their oil. You know, they don't have a lot of oil there, so they have to import it. Most of their energy is by coal. They import coal. They have coal, but they import coal. And you know what? Another thing that's been happening is there is an energy crunch now in China. For what? They've tried to maybe follow a little bit of the climate change doctrine, but they are having, like California had rolling blackouts. Well, now China does not have enough energy for its people, so they don't want the people upset. They don't want the people out protesting. So what are they doing? Well, they've cut back on what the factory use. And so some factories are just working 1 day a week or 2 days a week, and that's what's happening in China now. So what does that spell? Well, it spells economic disaster. If you got a population that's been growing phenomenally for decades, like, 10% a year, I mean, huge growth rate. What happens when it gets scaled down? And this is a year after COVID. It started in China. And, one thing I always thought, well, COVID hit China so bad, and we've talked on this show, when the word got out that there was COVID in China and they were begging for face masks, well, they emptied all the face masks from America and Europe, all the warehouses full of face masks for the medical community. They shipped them out to China because they needed them. They said they needed them. And then all of a sudden, China had a bunch of face masks to sell to the world when the virus went around the world. So I'm just saying that China in 2020, like everybody, had a tough year economically. But things are not getting better in China. They're shutting down their factories so that people have enough energy to heat their homes and cool their home. I don't know how much air conditioning they have, but there's an energy crunch going on in China. And what happens? Well, when there's an energy crunch, people aren't working as much, they're not getting paid as much, and so the middle class is going to have a hard time hanging on to being middle class. And we just talked about the Evergrande. or Evergrande, the company it's a real estate company. What if they go broke? What if the government tries to save them and they can't? Why couldn't they? Well, I just told you how much debt the government already has. What starts collapsing? Well, it goes back to, this is something you need to know. We've talked about cryptocurrencies on this program. We've explained them. We've talked about it. Go back and listen to the shows if you don't grasp cryptocurrencies. We've had several good interviews and shows about cryptocurrency. But and China, starting with their Winter Olympics coming up in just 3 or 4 months, in 2022, the Winter Olympics, the World Winter Olympics are going to be in China. And if you want to go there, and I don't know how many people get to travel there, but anything done with the Olympics has to be done through the Chinese digital yuan, the digital currency. And are they way ahead? Well, they want this digital currency to go through China, get rid of money, get rid of cash, and that way they'll know every penny everybody in China spends, every dollar. They'll know where you're spending it, what you're spending it on. Government will know. Now, I just have to say this. They'll know every penny, every dollar. But you know, in the bill the Democrats are trying to get passed, part of that in the reconciliation package is to make sure anybody that has over $600 in a bank account, that they turn all that information, the bank has to keep a record of it, turn all that information into the IRS. Are we not getting more like China? Does that not scare you? Does that not scare you that we are walking right into the same thing that is happening in communist China? Wow. Wake up, America. Please wake up. Please wake up. So is China on the brink of woe? Well, the article points out many good things. I go back to the article that's I was telling you about, written by Hal Brands and Michael Beckley. China is a declining power. They're not asking, they're just saying China is a declining power. And these are the reasons why. They talk about great powers and go back in history. And they said what's scary is a power that's not growing to surpass another superpower, but one is growing and then they stop growing. And then they think when they got the strength they do, they need to try to, say, take Taiwan if you're China. But they brought out some of the history of that. But one of the things that they brought out that what's going on in China now is the fact that with all this growth has come, the astounding growth that happened for decades is coming to an end. That's what they're talking about. The factories are not being opened up. Their productivity is declining. And you know, COVID-19 didn't help it at all. But it was already, they were slowing down. And it's talked about, and there's something called the Belt and Road Initiative, where trying to line up, like I said, Chinese banks for loaning money and making big tech companies in China that are the equivalent of the Facebooks and the Twitters. And what it is, they want control of these companies so much, they don't mind their stock prices going down because they're clamping down on them. They're clamping down on the entrepreneurs. And it's slowing down the Chinese economy. It's not good for the Chinese people. And then what happens when that happens? Well, are they going to get upset if they don't have the buying power? But that is why the communist government, the communist party that is over China, that they have got big decisions to make, because something that they pointed out is like 200 million workers, in the peak of their working career, 200 million in China are in the next 10 to 20 years,